For counter conditioning to occur, the elements that I'll talk about here are important. When I'm working with clients who are convinced that using counter conditioning didn't work for them in the past, my first thought goes to how techniques might have been applied. Often, the training mechanics are to blame. The sequence of events, the timing, or the consistency may have been inaccurate. If these things aren't in place, counter conditioning will not be successful. And we still have some theory to cover in this course, but I'd like to get you all started on some practice. Now, in this lesson, you'll get your next assignment. Consider setting up your camera and record yourself doing this task. You will learn lots about your own training mechanics, and you'll see what you might want to practice. And note that no one is perfect. We all make training mistakes. It's by practicing and reviewing our mechanics that we get better at applying techniques. So don't worry if you experience several oops moments while you practice. Everyone has them. The best trainers learn from them. So here's your assignment. For this task, you'll be practicing your timing and sequence of events when applying counter conditioning techniques. And here are the rules of the game. Rule number 1. For this assignment, find an item that is completely neutral to your dog. It means absolutely nothing to him. And I recorded this upcoming demo video several years ago, and while I was setting things up, I picked up several items in my home thinking that they were neutral to my young dog Benny. But it turns out they weren't. For example, I picked up a flashlight, and he ran to the patio door. What? Why? Oh, right. Well, I used that flashlight to check for skunks before letting him out for his last pee of the night. I put the flashlight away. I picked up a dish towel, and then he sat in front of me wagging his tail. Really, Benny? A dish towel? Oh, right. It looks a lot like the small towel that I use to wipe his paws when he comes in, followed by tons of treats. So I put the dish towel away. And after a few more attempts, I picked up an empty ice tray, and I got zero response from him. Now, he looked at it with interest, but he didn't recognize it as anything meaningful to him. Perfect. That's the item that I ended up using. So my goal was now to create an association between the sight of the ice tray and yummy food. And with practice, accuracy, consistency, and repetition, I should begin to see the following result. The sight of the ice tray should trigger an involuntary response in Benny, the same response that he has when I present him with food. And note that it takes many, many, many repetitions over time for an association to truly take hold. Your dog might quickly begin to recognize the sequence of events during your exercises. Like, oh, there's that thing. Usually food follows. But in order for the presence of the neutral item to actually lead to an involuntary response like excitement or salivation, it'll take time and consistency. It's not magic. It's science. So that's rule number 1. Find a neutral item to work with. And rule number 2. Hide the item and a handful of food behind your back, out of your dog's view. Rule number 3. Practice presenting your dog with the neutral item and pairing it with food. Remember that you're practicing your mechanics, so pay special attention to the following elements, all of which are illustrated in the demo video that you'll see in just a moment. Present the neutral item before delivering the food. You can present the item, remove it by putting it behind your back, and then deliver the food. Or you can also present the item, leave it there, and keep feeding while the item is present. But the important takeaway here is that the neutral item appears before the food does. Remove the item before withdrawing the food. The presence of the item will always predict that food will now happen. If the item is there, then so is the food. And to make sure that the item is never there without also food being there, the food doesn't stop coming until after the item has been removed. The food must appear immediately after the item appears. There's no time for a coffee break. The moment your dog notices the item, food must appear in less than a second. This will all make more sense when you watch the demo video, which I'll show you here in just a second. And there's just one more thing I want to mention first. Here's how people sometimes go wrong with the sequence of events. You might recognize this common problem. It's one of the most frequent issues that people run into when they're trying to apply counter conditioning to help their dog change the way that they feel about a scary thing. The person mistakenly makes the food appear when they themselves have noticed the trigger, without taking into consideration that the dog might not yet have seen the trigger. For example, while walking with their dog who's afraid of strangers, they see a man in the distance and they begin shoving food in their dog's face. And the dog happily takes the food, but he isn't even aware yet that there's a stranger in the distance. Now, for the correct association to be made, the food must appear after the dog, and not the handler, has noticed the trigger. And in this common problematic scenario, the dog is presented with food and then he notices the trigger in the distance. The association that he's making is the presence of food predicts that a scary thing will now appear. Oops, that's backwards. Notes to keep in mind as you watch the demo video. You'll see Benny offer a few different behaviors that have previously been reinforced, like sitting or lying down or seeking eye contact with me. None of these matter when doing counter conditioning techniques. He'll get the food when the item is present, regardless of what he's doing. His behavior does not matter, and I'm not paying any attention to it. When you see him lying down before I begin a sequence, that's his choice entirely. I haven't asked him to do anything, and I would have proceeded even if he was standing or jumping up on me. Benny was hungry when I made this video, so he was super eager to get food, and you'll hear him vocalize a little bit, but that's also a common Border Terrier trait. I could have fed him first. There's no need for him to be hungry before this exercise. All done. Take your time with this exercise. It's okay to make mistakes. In fact, the reason that you're practicing with these neutral objects now is so that you're more comfortable and accurate with your mechanics when you're working on something that your dog actually fears. Remember to record yourself and watch the video with a critical eye on your timing and the sequence of events. I promise it's worth the effort.